Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video for today. So let's talk a little bit about Intel, because Intel is up 11% today. Intel is up 30% year to date, absolutely crushing the market in 2025. Of course, Intel over the last 3 years is still down 30%, and over the 5 years down close to 50%. Still in a drawdown here from their highs of around 63.4%, has a market cap now closer to $110 billion. The major move, of course, came in the recent week, basically, or well, over the last month, it's up 13%. Over the past 5 days, it's up 10%, actually a little bit more than that. So, you know me, I've been talking about Intel for a long time. I've had shares of Intel for a while, although right now at $26, even the shares that I still had, because remember, I did transfer my shares to call options, which I did not know this was the best thing to do. Pure coincidence, right? Pure coincidence. The timing could not have been better, because this is basically what I bought. January 2027, $30 call option for Intel. And as you can see, as of the time of recording this, I am up 126.6% already, which also means that I now only have these call options on Intel. My shares, my remaining shares, I have sold them as well to increase the cash position. That was the whole premise of this move, is not have that much cash locked into the Intel position, but still have quite a lot of upside exposure, which again, I did not expect to see these results in a matter of a week or so. Of course, the question now remains, do I keep this, right? Don't touch it, or do I already take some profits? Logically speaking, I could be taking here 25% or so, right? So 50% of my initial investment, and then let the rest just grow, right? That should be, I guess, the logical thing to do. Although I don't really need the cash right now. My cash pile has been increasing a little bit more recently. But yeah, I don't know. If you're an options expert out there, I usually don't really do options. But if you want to help me out, just share your thoughts down in the comment section below. But I do want to touch on why this has happened and why I still think that my $30 could be hit next month or 2 months from now. Of course, we could also go back under $25 depending on the news that we get around this company. And so let's go over everything you need to know with regards to Intel. If you enjoy this type of videos, hit all the buttons, would really appreciate that. If you want to support me even further, do check out the link down in the description and in the pinned comment with the top 10 best stocks to buy now, or go to fool.com/couchinvestor. Thank you very much. All right, so first up, we've had this come out. Trump administration reportedly weighs 10% stake in Intel via CHIPS Act grant, making government top shareholder. At current valuation, 10% will be around $10.4 billion. Now, some might see this as, well, this doesn't make any sense. Intel is dead. Why would they waste that money, right? But again, this is via the CHIPS Act grant, which is also what Secretary Bessent has said. US investment in Intel would be a conversion of grants and possible increase to help Intel stabilize. The last thing we're going to do is take a stake and try to run the business. Very important to note. And of course, right now, these are just reports and comments from Secretary Bessent. No official statement has been made by Intel or even the White House, I would say, with regards to that 10% stake. Now, some might say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Intel is struggling. It's dead. Why would you waste your time with it? Well, just an FYI, you know that Taiwan also owns around 6 to 7% of TSM, right? A minority stake in TSMC. It makes sense, right? Because TSMC is of extreme importance to Taiwan, and of course now is of extreme importance to the whole semiconductor industry. For the US to take a 10% stake, whether it's through this, converting some or all of Intel's grant from the 2022 US CHIPS Act, or some other way, I think it makes absolute sense. Intel, a US company, US foundry as well, if you can add an extra highly competitive US foundry to the whole semiconductor ecosystem, right? To add to TSM, to add to Samsung, especially for the United States to have actually a real US player, why not? Why not do this? It absolutely makes sense. Then you can talk about what happens next. Is it fair that the US might force the other players to use Intel? No, I don't think so. And the other players will, of course, not agree to this unless they have something to gain from it. Intel, of course, at the end of the day, will need to make sure that 18A, all of the versions of 18A, and then the future, of course, 14A, they have to make sure that these technologies are the best of the best, or at least on par with TSM, right? Because if that's not the case, then regardless if they get some contracts from the United States government or for some small contracts here and there from some other players, they won't survive for the long run. What you need to have with Intel right now, especially at $110 billion, if you can turn this around, if you can make sure that Intel, foundry and non-foundry, is going to be profitable, then Intel is going to be worth a hell of a lot more money. And that 10% stake here is going to look like a genius move 10 years down the line, right? Imagine if you could take a small stake in TSM a long, long time ago, right? You look like a genius today. But of course, the most important part is to make sure that Intel, the products that they make, the foundry, the technology, is top notch. If that's not the case, then what's the point? I agree. Then we've had this announcement come out. SoftBank Group and Intel Corporation signed $2 billion investment agreement. So they announced their signing of a definitive securities purchase agreement under which SoftBank will make a $2 billion investment in Intel common stock. This, from what I understood, is not SoftBank buying Intel stock on the market. These are newly issued stocks. So of course, yes, there is some dilution here, but at least it's now $2 billion that Intel can get. And this also means that there is now a strategic, I won't say maybe partnership, strategic investment from SoftBank. And if you don't know, SoftBank basically owns ARM. And we know that SoftBank, ARM, NVIDIA, Oracle, OpenAI, they're all involved in those huge Stargate projects. Now, could this be another piece of that huge puzzle that, well, Masayoshi Son, as you know, and SoftBank, they will be investing quite a lot of money in the United States. Well, they've committed to invest quite a lot of money in the United States. Is this, again, one of the ways for SoftBank to get another piece of that whole AI master plan of theirs? Could very well be. Could this also mean that SoftBank could say to ARM, look, we're investing now in Intel, you're already working together, maybe not that close, but you're already working together. Maybe it's time for us to work even closer together on next-gen technologies, on next-gen AI projects, right? This $2 billion, in my opinion, is just the tip of the iceberg here. If you go and put all of the puzzle pieces together from the last 2 weeks or so, I think there's a bigger story here. Of course, there are lots of ifs, as we've discussed during the live stream. There's a lot of ifs. If this happens, then that will happen. If this happens, then that will happen. Yes, this will take time. This is, again, I think this is the mother of the turnaround stories. Because we've also had this come out. SoftBank held talks with Intel on buying chip foundry unit. So the Financial Times reported that Masayoshi Son met with Intel CEO Lee Butan in recent weeks to discuss a potential deal for Intel's struggling contract chip making business. The discussions came just before SoftBank announced its $2 billion equity investment in Intel and could still lead to a larger transaction in the future. Buying Intel Foundry would align with Son's push to build a full AI infrastructure spanning chips, data centers, and robotics. He already holds major stakes in OpenAI, NVIDIA, and ARM, and has backed the $500 billion Stargate project. So, of course, you have to believe the story here, right? Everything in investing is basically believing a story based on performance, based on management, based on strategic moves and all of that. But here, you have to believe the story. You have to believe the story that clearly Intel is a very, very important asset here. I know there are some haters there that think this is a company that will go bankrupt, it's worth zero. But no, even Intel Foundry might be losing a lot of money, but it still generates $17 billion in revenue. So imagine what happens when Intel Foundry suddenly starts to get more and more contracts. Of course, again, 18A has to be very good, 14A has to be good as well. But when you start to see a little bit of momentum, you can start to understand why Intel stock starts to go up, because it does seem like a lot of people, whether it's the US government, but also some players in the semiconductor, in the AI space, see the value of investing in Intel today. right? They might be looking at Intel today and they're like, you know what? Everything Intel has, the potential that it can have in the future if we do turn this thing around is immense. Is immense. And I think the majority can agree with that a well-run Intel, of course, in this case with some help, with some external help, is worth way more than just $110 billion. And that's the whole thing here. That's the whole thing here with Intel. This is the main reason, well, these are the main reasons why the stock has gone up. This is the main reason why my options are performing so well over the past week or so. And now we'll see what happens. Can we continue with this momentum? It does seem like we did have, again, that pullback here from the previous tops, right, at around $26.50. RSI is high, but not overbought just yet. There's definitely a lot of momentum, but right now that's the thing. There is a lot of momentum on the story behind Intel's turnaround. Like I said at the start of this video, maybe a month from now, we are at $30 because, again, there are more talks, more rumors, more reports that come out, or we could go all the way back to $20 or so if suddenly, oh, actually, maybe the US government does not want to take a 10% stake in the company, right? Maybe suddenly there are, again, attacks on Intel CEO from President Trump. This could definitely happen. I'm just betting on the positive things right now. I'm just betting on the fact that everything that has happened over the past couple of days and weeks is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's the US government, SoftBank, ARM, all putting Intel as well, putting the right pieces in the right places. And yeah, I still hold my options. I will probably write them out. I do still think that it will reach $30 way before January 2027. Of course, since they are performing so well right now, it would make sense to take a little bit of profit from my initial stake, increase the cash position even more, and we'll see what happens, right? Because let's say we do have a pullback, then this might be an opportunity for me to buy even more call options. Same thing here. Maybe March or maybe September 2026, $30. We'll see what the strike price is. But overall, it's quite crazy that I made more money with Intel in a week and a half than I did holding Intel for the past, 2 years or so. I guess that's the magic of options, but for the same price, it could have gone the other way, although the risk reward was in my favor because at the time of buying the options, I mean, the stock was around $20, $21 or so. So again, risk reward wise, I think it made a hell of a lot more sense to convert my shares into call options. Usually you do the other way around. You convert your calls into shares when it hits your targets. But yeah, all in all, that's about it. I still believe this is going to be one of the best turnaround stories. It will just take a little bit more time than expected. But yeah, I think with Libutan as CEO, things will be moving quite fast, especially in 2025. 18A is still of extreme importance. So all in all, that's about it for me in this video. What do you think? Down in the comment section below. And I see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.